Thursday, July 2nd, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So the Bank of England is holding on to Venezuela's gold. And of course, the British say that the government of Venezuela is not the representative of the Venezuelan people, even though if you look at the United Nations, the permanent representative to the United Nations is Samuel Reynaldo Moncada Acosta. He works for the Venezuelan government, of course, under President Nicolas Maduro, not Guaido. So what's going on at the Bank of England and Venezuela's gold? They've got about $1 billion worth of gold there, so it isn't that much gold for a country. I would say, though, that in 2011, Chavez was very clever and took out 100 metric tons of Venezuelan gold from the Bank of England back in the summer of 2011. He withdrew all the physical gold, shipped it, I think, by boat to Caracas, and that corresponded pretty much with the time that gold made an all-time high. I wonder if all the physical that he withdrew from the market led to the rise in the price of gold. Back in May, I did a video in which I spoke about this case right now because the Venezuelan government, or the Venezuelan Central Bank to be exact, they've taken the Bank of England and the UK government to court in London. The decisions come out today. I'm going to go through that. But first of all, I'll tell you about the video I did back in May. It was called "The Day the Bank of England Let Hitler Loot Czechoslovakia's Gold." Yes, they did that. I recommend you watch this video and to see how the bankers in London, in the city of London, operate. So with that, I'm going to go to the decision that came out today. I think it's quite outrageous. Unfortunately, the British and the American governments, which are, of course, run by the bankers, they don't represent the British people. I'm not criticizing the British people. I'm not criticizing Americans. But whenever they change the rules, there's always an excuse. They're doing it democratically. They're doing it through the courts. I would say this UK court is a kangaroo court. What about when the US and the UK invaded Iraq? That was illegal. How come Bush Jr. and Tony Blair are not in The Hague? I would say they're much bigger outlaws than Maduro, even though I don't think he's doing a very good job in Venezuela. He's still the head of state, and the UN thinks that. So maybe the UK doesn't recognize the United Nations anymore, or only recognizes the United Nations when it suits them, right? So this is out today. 3 hours ago, UK court rejects Maduro's claim of $1 billion of Venezuelan gold held by Bank of England. High Court, or Kangaroo Court, I would say, not a high court, says opposition leader Juan Guaido is unequivocally recognized as legitimate president. Well, let's go through this article and you see what a load of baloney this is. It says a British court has dealt a blow to attempts by Nicolas Maduro's regime to access $1 billion of Venezuelan gold held at the Bank of England by ruling that opposition leader Juan Guaido had been unequivocally recognized as Venezuela's president by the UK. That doesn't really make sense. So the UK now decides who's the president of another country? This is crazy. Mr. Justice Tier said on Thursday that it was the British government's prerogative to decide who was the legitimate head of state. So I guess the UK is back to ruling the world and the waves, right? Previous cases had established that the government had to speak with one voice on such an issue, and so there could be no doubt about its decision, he ruled. This is a tremendous victory, said Vanessa Neumann, Mr. Guaido's ambassador to the UK. And you see why I'm laughing about that, because the UK has another ambassador from Venezuela, the rightful ambassador, who was sent by the rightful government of Venezuela, whose president is Maduro. It's just really crazy. As she said, the verdict is a victory for the people of Venezuela and the rule of law more generally. I would say it's the rule of the jungle. And I really think it's crazy for other countries to hold their gold with the Bank of England. This is a really bad decision. I would, if I were other central banks and the Bank of England has a lot of gold, like 5,000 tons stored for other central banks, I would be taking that gold out of the Bank of England. It highlights the importance of a judiciary that is independent and non-political. I don't know what she's talking about. A kangaroo court. Lawyers representing the Maduro government said that they would appeal against the ruling. Short of cash amid a dire economic emergency, Mr. Maduro's revolutionary socialist government, revolutionary? I mean, he was elected, is pursuing frozen Venezuelan assets around the world. Well, we've got a socialist government here. America has got a socialist government. Look at all the schemes they've come out with after this crisis, all the money they're spending, all the money printing. We're just as socialist. In its claim, Venezuela's Central Bank, BCV, had tried to access the gold held at the Bank of England. It said funds from the sale of the gold would be routed to the United Nations Development Program to combat coronavirus, a suggestion scorned by Mr. Guaido and his supporters, who said it would be stolen. Mr. Guaido told the FT that the court heard the case in May, that the Bank of England would in effect be financing torture. Wow. If Mr. Maduro were to win, the UK Central Bank holds about 500,000 bars of gold worth 200 billion pounds and is the second largest custodian of gold in the world after the New York Fed Reserve, according to the BOE's website. Well, the Germans don't trust the Bank of England or the Fed anymore, or the New York Fed. They took a lot of their gold out of the New York Fed. It took them years to give the gold back to the Germans, and they took a lot of gold out of the Bank of England as well. The case turned on who the High Court believed was legally recognized by the UK as Venezuela's head of state, Mr. Maduro or Mr. Guaido. The British government, along with the US, the EU, and most, what does that mean? Most Latin American nations issued a statement recognizing Mr. Guaido as Venezuela's constitutional interim president in February 2019 because they said Mr. Maduro had rigged the presidential election the previous year. This is the interesting part. Unusually, though, London continued to maintain full diplomatic relations with Mr. Maduro's government after recognizing Mr. Guaido. So the British government they want to have their cake and eat it, right? It allowed a Maduro-appointed envoy, Rocio Manero, to serve as UK ambassador in the UK and to keep control of Venezuela's diplomatic buildings. The UK also maintained a full embassy presence in Caracas. So I'm going to stop at this here right now. But the lesson I would say, and I'm not sure whether central bankers from around the world, some of them might watch my videos, but my message to them would be get your gold out of the Bank of England if possible. It might be too late. The Bank of England, you can't trust them. As I said in my video in May, the Bank of England under Governor Montague Norman allowed the German government in 1939, and we all know which government was in power in 1939 in Germany. They allowed the German government to basically confiscate or steal Czechoslovakia's gold that they had in the BIS account with the Bank of England. So that's the kind of institution the Bank of England is, and you shouldn't really trust them. Yeah, I wouldn't put a gram of gold with them. You can't trust them. So Venezuela has learned the hard way, even though about 9 years ago, Chavez got most of Venezuela's gold out of the Bank of England. There's still a little bit left there, $1 billion. It's a lot of money, of course, but not for a country, I would say. Anyway, there you go. More chicanery from the bankers and from the UK government and the courts, or a kangaroo court. They call it a high court. I don't think it's a high court. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, share it far and wide. People need to learn about what the bankers do. You can't trust them. And also think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And just one more thing I wanted to say. I've got nothing against the British people. I live here. I've been living here for almost 30 years, and I've got nothing against the Americans as well. The problem I have was with the people running the system, the bankers, and the politicians who are basically their puppets. So there you go. I wish you all a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye.